Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. This is the video you have all been waiting for. Yes, finally we're talking about what is a bird cage awl. Let's take a look. First off, let's answer, what's an awl? An awl is basically a rod that comes to a point that you can jam into a surface or you can use it to mark a line. It's a very general use tool that has a lot of different purposes in the shop. The normal awl that you're going to buy nowadays comes to a rounded point here, and it is shaped rounded, basically a spear that jams into the wood, and that's great. But there's another type of awl that used to be very, very common called the bird cage awl, and I did a video on making this one recently. It's basically the exact same thing, rounded piece of steel, but this time rather than being rounded at the tip, it actually comes into these square points. Some of them will come in a triangular fashion or a diamond fashion, but the most common one is to see these square sides. You'll actually hear it being called a square awl as well. Awls are generally made of a slightly softer steel. You can grab a file and sharpen them with the file, and that's generally what I'm going to do with these round ones, is just kind of roll it as we go and sharpen it down with a file. That's different from a punch. A punch is actually made of a hardened steel. Particularly this one is spring-loaded, so when I push it, it pops and it drives in that way. This is going to be very hard to sharpen because it is a hardened steel. Awls tend to have a slightly softer steel, so you can shape them a little bit easier. An awl is kind of like a pen marking gauge. It makes a really nice line and won't follow the grain quite as easily. It also will allow you to mark on other surfaces. So I can set up on this, and just like with a marking knife or a pencil, I can draw a line. It's not going to give me quite as clean of a line because it's crushing the fibers, but if I'm going with the grain, it actually will stay with the ruler far better than a knife. A knife will dive in and cut along it, whereas this will actually give me a fairly clean line. So if I'm marking with the grain, I'm usually going to grab an awl. As well as if I'm working in other materials such as softer metals, this is actually really, really good for scribing lines in the metal and doing that. If you're working in materials that are harder, you can actually find awls that have a little bit harder material in this so that they will scratch better into that. The name bird cage awl actually comes from the history of making bird cages. It was not uncommon for someone who is out catching birds to be out in the woods and make a cage from what he's finding. You can do that with little more than just an awl. This will actually drill the holes, and you can then split down the wood to fit into them and create little staves to make a bird cage. So how does that drill a hole? With a standard awl, you can drive it in, but it only goes in so far. It just kind of turns into a wedge and you get this stopping point. With a bird cage awl though, you can push it in a little ways and turn it, push it in and turn it, push it in and turn it, and keep doing that with a little bit of force, and this will eventually drill a hole all the way through the work. A really quick and easy way to drill a hole without many tools at all, just grab an awl and run it through the board. And now I have a hole that I can put a stave in, and I can make a bird cage out of that. Because it has those square sides, it actually cuts the wood rather than just being a wedge and driving in there. So you can actually use this to drill a hole, and it's dependent upon the final size of the shaft. In this case, it's about 1/4 inch. I also have this one here that's an 1/8 inch, and I use this one quite a bit. This one's a lot easier to drill a hole. It just goes in and cranks down, and with an 1/8 inch, just like that, we've got a hole that runs all the way through it. The other common use is if I need to start a screw. That profile matches the screw profile very, very well in the center shaft. So I can use this to drill down in a little ways, and then this will give me that conical path that I can put a screw into, and I can get a really good grip being able to start it incredibly easily. An awl is a great way to pre-drill. I've actually come to the point in my shop where I don't see much of use for the standard round awl. I actually prefer using a bird cage awl for almost everything. Now the nice thing about a round one is if you're following a line, it is the same distance from the point to the outside edge no matter where you're going. So if you have a square one, you have to make sure that the square edge stays up against it, but it's really kind of a minor difference. And so I've gone to changing all of mine over to square. Except I found this one. So let me show you how I would change this one. I'm going to put it in a vise, grab a fairly fine mill file, and I'm going to keep the mill file flat and square one edge down just a little ways. Now if I'm just sharpening it, I don't mess with it in here. I'm just going to put it flat on this. But for establishing the bevel, I like to actually put it in there. So I do one side and then I rotate it 180, so I can do the other side. And there's nothing magical about these sides being perfectly parallel or perpendicular to each other. They just need to be relatively close. You'll be able to refine them a little bit more when it comes time to sharpen it. We're just getting the actual profile in there. Now that I have two sides done, I can rotate it so that those two sides are vertical, and then repeat the process for the last two sides. And there you have the rough shape. Square edge, square edge, square edge. It doesn't need to be too much more than that. Now you'll notice that this just comes to a very, very sharp point. We actually kind of want to round over the tip a little bit more. With this larger 1/4 inch, you can see how the tip kind of comes in to a little bit more of an obtuse angle. Kind of in the same way that the screw does. It kind of tapers down at the point. We want to create that tip on there. So this is the way I normally would sharpen it. Just set it up here on the edge of the bench. And I'm going to put it flat to where it was, but then as I move, I'm going to roll the file forward. Then rotate it 90 degrees. Rotate it 90 degrees. Rotate it 90 degrees. And then just check for symmetricality. And that's what I'm looking for right there. Bird Cage Awl. So whether you're scribing a line or drilling a hole or making a bird cage for an owl, there's an awl for that. Yeah, you didn't have to wait to the end of the video for that one, sorry. These are just a kind of a fun little tool. Something that has disappeared a bit in history, but is a very, very useful tool in the woodworking shop. These aren't as common for use in leather work. Leather likes to have the round one so you don't have any stress point on it. But for drilling a hole in a surface like wood, anything softer than walnut, cherry, these work really, really well for drilling delicate holes. And you can get a set of them with different diameters so that you can drill different diameter holes or for different particular types of screws. You could have one that is set up for a size 10 screw, a size 8 screw, and they work very, very well for getting those starting holes and pre-drilling. These are honestly a lot of fun. It's nice to work with tools that have been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The Egyptians used to use these, and we still have use for them today. So I hope you like this little dive into something a little more different and fun. If you'd like to see the video of making this one, I have links to that down below. It's a really simple kit made from Tay Tools, but honestly, all you really need is a smooth shaft. You can pick that up from any hardware store and shape your tip on it. They are incredibly useful, a lot of fun, and very, very simple. And yeah, dangerous. So I hope you like this video. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, mentions that I should bring up, let me know that down below. Also, I do want to say thank you to everyone who does comment down below because you are helping the channel, as well as hitting the like, share, subscribe. Those things do help us and they get us in front of more people and help the channel to grow. Thank you for that. On top of all of that, you may notice that there's a bunch of people scrolling over on the side. These names are people who are patrons on Patreon. They are the ones who are supporting this channel and keeping us going. Without patrons on Patreon, we wouldn't exist. We are completely sponsored by you, the viewer, and I like to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help out with that, you can find out more about Patreon down below, or click the little join button and become a member here on YouTube. We have special perks for both patrons and members. We do occasionally just turn on the camera and do a live for patrons and members. So if you like that, think about joining Patreon or becoming a member here on YouTube. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This video really reminds me of an old Looney Tunes cartoon because that's all, folks.